So the UNEP Live Web Intelligence component that we have built over the last year or so, the underlying goal is to capture social perceptions, to analyze stakeholder communication around environmental indicators. So as many of you will know, UNEP Live itself gathers a lot of statistical information, a lot of open data around environmental indicators and groups them by, for example, geographic region. And in addition to this understanding of the natural world, of what's happening in the ecosystem as such, the Web Intelligence platform provides the infosphere component. So what are the stakeholders? What are citizens? What are news media, for example? What are they discussing related to environmental topics, related to specific indicators? How are, for example, certain policy measures are being perceived? So all these questions we aim to answer with the system. And unfortunately, I haven't received yet this invitation to share my screen.
Still no, I've sent it twice. Okay, just bear with us, everyone, please. This is important. It claims that it's gone. I will make it back to myself and then sorry everyone for this. It's been sent again, Arno. It says you are the presenter.
I get a waiting message, but I don't get anything else. There's a little spinning wheel. My apologies for that, but I think we really need the screen share. Should I quickly log out and on again? Maybe that solves it.
Yes, I think so. Please. Sorry for this, everyone. It's a first. Arno, are you back on again already?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So, have you received it this time?
Yes, now I received an invitation. And hopefully now you can see my screen. Is it broadcasting?
Not yet. Waiting to view. Sorry everyone, we've not had this problem before. Let's try one more time.
Eric, can you share?
I'm trying, yeah. Yeah, I've sent it again.
My GoToMeeting says I'm sharing my screen. You should see UNEP Live now if it works.
Does anyone else see that?
Yes, we do see it, or I do see it.
You see UNEP
Yes.
live?
Yes,
Yes, we can see it.
I see.
Okay, perfect.
Go ahead, please.
So there are various ways how you can access the web intelligence component of UNEP Live. One is this little button here in the upper right corner, which gets you to the global view. And we have also produced, if you want to share it with others, there's a little video tutorial that's like a 3-4 minute summary of some of the main functions. Other ways are you can also go, for example, to a specific country page, such as Austria, and then you will find a specific web intelligence tab that guides you directly to the country-specific portion of the coverage. And as we said last time, where we just had very limited time, we want to take a bit of a deeper look into the various features of the platform. I'm planning to start with English content, but it is multilingual, so we'll add other languages later on as well. In terms of the content sources that we're currently tapping into is news media sources, it's social media sources, and it's environmental and government and other organizations that are regularly publishing on environmental issues. And this is the menu where you can also select additional languages. There is the analysis that you see right now in front of you is for the last 2 months, so that's our default interval, which can be easily changed. So any analysis you can also do over longer periods of time using this dialog. There is a sentiment filter. When you look at the dashboard, you see red and green colors in various visualizations, which I'll go into more detail in a few minutes. This color coding reflects sentiment. So if the topic is represented in a positive or negative context, so if a lot of positive or negative terms are appearing in the documents that we have gathered, and you can select this as well. If you switch to negative, then you slice and dice through the whole data set, and now you're exclusively analyzing negative documents. Or you can do the opposite, of course, as well. So this is if you're particularly interested in stakeholder opinions and who are driving like a negative coverage on a topic or positive, that's a very good filter to have. On the upper left side, these are predefined topics. So that's queries on the database that are stored. And by clicking on one of these topics, you can trigger the search for this topic. So if I click on biodiversity, I trigger a search for biodiversity. If I want to make this current search visible in the trend chart, I have to activate it down here. So that's one way to trigger searches. We have a few general topics defined up here, also several regions that correspond to the UNEP Live regions. Or if you're interested in a completely different topic or a very specific topic, you have a full text search capability in the upper. So I'm looking for air pollution, for example. A very crucial part of the dashboard is this lower left corner, because it not only shows you the current search term, air pollution, the numbers that you see next to all these terms, they reflect the total number of mentions in this 2-month interval. So the term air pollution, the exact phrase, was in the selected samples in news and organizations in English between the 8th of April and 8th of June was mentioned 2,283 times. So this is what this line says. Now underneath the associations, these are not predefined at all. These are automatically extracted by the system, and it takes a look what are the currently selected sources associating with the term. So what is the perception of this term in this stakeholder group? And we have here as top associations air pollution, Delhi, diesel, air quality, London, CSE, lung. And I can show these associations in a trend chart as well by simply activating them here. So that the trend chart not only allows to track the amount of coverage of your search term, but also of the associations. When you do mouse over the trend chart, you can quickly scan what was happening here that caused a peak. So if I take diesel, which was the number 2 associations, I have a strong peak here. And not surprisingly, it was Volkswagen, Scandal, Mitsubishi. So it was this ongoing topic that's now related to the diesel emissions. By clicking on a trend chart, and by the way, this is a menu you find in many different components. It's quite powerful in terms of narrowing down a search to very specific interest. You have 3 options: replace, restrict, and extend. Replace, as the name suggests, replaces the current search with a completely new search for whatever you have clicked on. Restrict is a Boolean AND, so that means both terms have to appear. I can show this maybe down here. It's easier to understand with the associations. If I want now to see what about air pollution and Delhi, I can click on Delhi here and say restrict. That means I'm now only querying for those documents that contain both terms, air pollution and Delhi. And then, as you can already see in the geographic map, I have now really put the focus here. I have 194 documents remaining that mention both Delhi and air pollution. And all the other visualization, all the analysis you can do are now focusing on this particular query. So let me go back to air pollution. And the same thing you can do in the trend chart by clicking replace. Then you're triggering a search for exactly those documents that made up this peak. Because the best peak doesn't help you a lot if you don't know what has been causing it and what are the underlying processes. Now that we take a look at the trend chart, we can make this larger as well. There are various time series available to track these topics. Share of voice, the weekly frequency, so how often a term was mentioned per week, the average sentiment, positive or negative, and the disagreement, which is the standard deviation of the sentiment. So the higher the value here, the more polarizing the coverage, so the more the sentiment deviates between the various voices. A very important part of the dashboard is the middle area, which presents the results. And some of our representations have these floating menus on the left side. With this menu, you can select between various ways to display the search results, and you can also select the sorting of the search results. Going back to the menu up here, for air pollution, we had 2,200 documents. You cannot, of course, show a list of 2,200 documents in the browser. That would just be too much to send to the browser. So we do a selection. So we select 50 as a default, and you can just page to the next 50, or you can change the number. I could change these 250 documents. Then I'm querying for the top 250 documents that match my query, and you immediately see it in the geographic map that you get more documents projected on this map. But let's go back to 50. I just wanted to show you this because this is the sorting criteria. Which 50 out of these 2,200 are you actually selecting from the coverage? And the default criteria is the date, so you're being shown the 50 most recent ones. So you see there are a lot of documents that came in today. You can also sort it by sentiment, show the most positive or the most negative documents. By relevance, so how closely do they match the search query, and by source, then you just sort them alphabetically by the name of the website that this information stems from. Maybe I should also go into the process of data capturing, because now we're having these websites and the URLs. There are various methods used to capture content. We are capturing for this platform about 10 million documents that are relevant to environmental issues per month. And we have a crawler-based architecture that goes out to all these websites from environmental organizations, from news media, and captures their documents. We use RSS feeds for real-time updates, and we use APIs from social media platforms, Google+, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, to gather content from these platforms as well. Once we have determined that a document is relevant, it's automatically enriched by metadata. So we assign document labels, so keywords to each document. We determine if every sentence or every document, what is the sentiment? Is it a positive or negative document? We try to identify named entities, persons, organizations in the coverage. We also try to identify locations. Are there any geographic names mentioned in the document? And if yes, then we can extract the coordinates that match this geographic entity, and we can project it on the map in the upper right corner. So this is how we can generate these maps, which I'll go into more detail a bit later on. So all these things happen fully automatically, of course, and then they are being made available in this visual dashboard. And I'm now presenting you the various ways how you can present the results. Maybe this is a good point. Are there any question of, what type of data we're analyzing here, how we get the data, how we extract this metadata? So the first that you've already seen the whole time is the list of documents. When you mouse over these documents, in the screen above, the trend chart is replaced by an automatically generated summary of the document. It also shows the metadata we extracted. So the gray terms above the title are the document keywords, and the footer of that little abstract shows where does it come from, which locations are being mentioned in the document, and the sentiment that the document has received. More granular is the sentence view, which in many cases is much more useful because now you don't have to read the whole documents. You can just mouse over and quickly see how this term is being used within the documents without having to read the whole document. And while I mouse over, you will also recognize that on the right side, all these visualizations are linked. So if there are some tag cloud keywords that are mentioned in this document, you see them highlighted, and you can also track on the geographic map what is the location of the document that's currently being shown. If you do one click, you get the full sentences. So this is also this grouping. If you have two terms mentioned together here, that means the term air pollution was mentioned twice in this one document. So that's an easy way to track that. The next way to represent the results takes this list of sentences where the term appears and puts them into visual form. So you have the term outdoor pollution, and by mousing over these terms, it's very easy to track the lexical context. So how was this term really used, and what are the main threads in the conversation? There are some filter options here as well. For example, if you don't want to filter by stop words, you can also filter punctuation marks. Then this clustering is not done by punctuation marks. And of course, when you want to now do the same thing for daily or diesel, it's just a matter of clicking on the term you're interested in or putting the term up there. And then you get immediately this visual representation. So these first three elements in the dashboard are showing the actual results. There is, if you're more interested in the sources, so not what has been communicated, but who were the opinion leaders, or who were the most, who were those sources that mentioned the issue most. There is the sources menu, and by default it's sorted by the number of mentions. So the term air pollution in the last 2 months was most mentioned by the websites transportenvironment.org, followed by Daily Mail, etc. Underneath the URL of the source, there are little 3 gray keywords. These are not the keywords per document, but they are the keywords per source. So that means transportenvironment.org was associating with air pollution the terms diesel, noise, and real world. Whereas in Daily Mail, daily, Gopal, and odd even were the top associations that were extracted from this source for the search term. The various other columns show you the count, how many times was the term mentioned, the reach, which we take from Alexa traffic statistics, and the impact, which is multiplying count by reach. That means if, of course, it makes a difference if a very large website, so you see that Daily Mail and The Guardian got now to the top list, because they are, of course, have much more readers or have many more readers from their online editions, and that's why their impact is higher. You can also select the source by sentiment, showing which were those sources that brought the most negative coverage and which were the sources that had the most positive coverage. If we now take this list of sources and translate them into visual form, we end up with the source map. There's a little option in the source map, show labels, which makes it more meaningful for an interpretation, because it then shows the name of the websites. The scatter plot shows frequency along the horizontal dimension. So on the right, you have those sources that talked a lot about the issue. So we have this transportenvironment.org on the right side. And those that had mostly positive coverage on the top and the negative coverage below. And again, by changing this to any other of our topics, it's immediately being updated, and you can very quickly do cross-media analysis and see who are the positive and the negative voices on any given topic. We have also a list of entities, so that's persons, organizations, and locations, which analyzes the results on air pollution and then shows those persons that were mentioned most often in these documents. Of course, not every person reference, but all those persons and organizations or locations that are mentioned in Wikipedia. So it double checks with personal profiles on Wikipedia, and for those where they exist, it can now provide these entity-specific statistics as well. Now let's quickly move to the right side to the visualizations. As you have seen while I was demonstrating the portal, they are always keeping in sync. So everything you do in one of the windows immediately refreshes all the other views. And let's start with the keyword graph. The keyword graph is the visual representation of this list here. So it takes these social perceptions, so it takes what the chosen source in the chosen time interval is associating with air pollution and puts it in visual form. And it also allows to make manual queries to expand the tree in various points. And the layout of the tree is customizable. We can start again with the edges that you define here tells the system how many child nodes do you want to display. So if I click on air pollution, I start again, and I've defined 6 edges. So I get the top 6 associations with air pollution. And I can now switch it to 3, for example, and I click on plus. Then I add 3 child nodes to each of the main associations. Allows to get very quickly a good overview of how this topic is being perceived, and it works in conjunction with these adaptive tooltips. So if I want air pollution in London, I go and restrict, and now I get the specific associations that are being extracted only from those documents that also contain London. So that's the first visualizations. The second visualization is the tech cloud. I think you're all familiar with tech clouds. We use color coding to show the sentiment, and as all the other visual components, we do have these tooltips, so I can change this query now to Greenpeace, for example. Now the geographic map, as I understand, many of you will be particularly interested in the geospatial aspect of such a platform, and of course it's also the ideal way to convey global information flows. And you will see both markers and trajectories. They can be turned on and off here, so I can turn on and off these trajectories, and I can also turn off the search results. This visualization shows both where does information come from, so where are the authors located, and it also shows which locations are being mentioned in the documents. The markers, the round markers, show the locations that are being referenced in documents. So this is extracted from the full text of the document, and the trajectories show where information comes from. So that, for example, would be coverage coming from Australian media or organizations reporting about India. And the mouse over effect also shows this one trajectory. Another feature of all these visualizations is that they work in both directions. They work to visualize information, to output results, but also to quickly refine a query. If I'm interested in in air pollution in South America, for example, there is this tooltip. In addition to the replace, restrict, extend, it also has focus on this point. Which now changes the sorting of the results. So instead of showing you the 50 most recent, it shows the 50 documents which by proximity, so which are closest in terms of the locations they reference to where you have clicked. So if you want to have air pollution information, for example, on Africa, you can focus on this point, and then when you go through the list of documents, you can very quickly see the coverage around this area. This is probably a good point in the presentation to show you some of the multilingual features, because they have quite a big impact on the geographic map as well, because what you might have noticed, all the information, all the directories, of course, were very limited in terms of where they originate, because they're English language only. So let's just add languages. So we have two language options. The distinction is quite important. In the data sources, the content language is being defined. That means we process German, English, Spanish, and French content. The interface options, they represent all UN languages, so also languages where we cannot process the content as such, but we can present the analysis in that language. So let's add German, Spanish, and French. And you immediately see that the search term air pollution that I've put in is automatically translated in all the other languages. So we're now looking for pollution de l'air, for example, contaminación atmosférica. So it's automatically everything is translated in the background. And let me and of course we now get a much richer geographic display as well, because now we're not only having content that comes from Anglo-American countries, but we also have a lot of content from Southern American countries, for example, because they're now included in the other language options. Another topic like biodiversity, so which is immediately translated. On the interface languages, you select, for example, Chinese. So that means still we don't process Chinese content, but we take all the results of our analysis, so the associations, the keyword graph, the tag cloud, etc., and we show the results in that particular target language. So in effect, the goal here was we of course plan to add additional sources and languages to the system to be able to actually analyze coverage from countries where you don't even speak the language, but still be able to capture the main thread of the dialogue and what they are associated with the topic, or if an environmental issue is even being discussed in that country or that region at all. On the right side, there are various export functions. So some of the information I've shown, let's go back to the original query, because my Chinese is not that good. Let's take air pollution, and I'm interested in Delhi, London, lung, and air quality. So these are my charts. If I want to export this data series, I just click here on Excel, and I have the full time series data, which I can process then in any third-party application. So I have the positive frequency, negative frequency, I have the mean sentiment. So I have all the metadata as well, and I have the whole time series in a daily interval. I can also export the list of sources. We have the top source, the count, reach, impact, and also the source-specific keywords. Same thing with the association and the topics, and all the diagrams are also available in PNG or SVG format. What I haven't shown so far is social media. So of course I can add social media to the mix. And you immediately see there is much more content, of course, in the social media field. In the case of air pollution, for example, we have 125,000 documents. So if there is a little K, that also means I think we have K and M. So we have 1 million documents on climate change, for example, and for the search results, 125K. So that was also a goal of the system, to be able to cope with very large amounts of data and still being able to provide response times of just a second or two. In terms of configuration, we also plan to add additional topics in the upper left corner. The next one they will add is specific topics to cover the Sustainable Development Goals. So you'll be quickly, but just by clicking on the Sustainable Development Goal, you'll get all the coverage on a specific SDG, which will also be quite useful for many people in the community.
Costas' question was, Arno, does UNEP Live hold all the data you gather every day, or just pointers to the source? I can imagine that within a year you will be swimming in terabytes, maybe petabytes.
No, we all the content, like these 10 million documents, we keep. Of course, we don't keep all the multimedia content, so embedded images or things like that, we don't preserve. But we do keep the full text of the textual part of all the documents that are being gathered. Mm-hmm. So they're permanently stored.
I see. And Abby's question, well, it's an observation more. He says, important also to make a focus on the quality of existing data. How do you address, I guess this is not quantitative data, so what's the concept of quality here? How can you incorporate that?
Quality in terms of our metadata extraction, or quality in terms of the source? I'm not completely sure.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure if I don't want to put words into our questioner's mouth. We'll move on then.
I mean, maybe I can comment in general on that. One, what is important, what was so important for us in this, when we set up the system, was that we're able to mix and match these sources. So I can analyze news media alone, or I can analyze organizations alone, or I can combine them, because these sources, of course, have different levels of authority on a topic. We're also thinking of including scientific literature, for example. When we gather information on climate change from Twitter, of course we get lots of low-quality content, just what people mention online on Twitter, if they're expert or no, but this is on purpose. This is part of the goal that we have, to see if there are gaps in the perceptions. For example, to see something which is obvious in the scientific community or which is accurately presented in news media and gets a completely different spin in social media. Or we also find issues which are hardly any peak in news media, but are very heavily discussed in social media. So it, in a way, this tries to increase the transparency of the information flows, and also see what these different interest groups, how they approach this topic. So this was a bit in terms of quality of the content. So of course we cannot ensure quality of content from Twitter, but we can make sure that we treat the separate sources not together in one analysis, but we can really make very differentiated analysis based on the data. The second part, the quality of our metadata extraction, I fear that a detailed answer to that question would be beyond the scope of this call, but of course all the individual metadata extractions, being sentiment or extracting named entities like persons, they are the outcome of many years of research and are often evaluated with human evaluators or against existing gold standards. So there's a lot of effort going into ensuring the quality, but also continuously improving the precision and recall of these methods.
Good, thank you. So we have some more questions. I'm going to try one last attempt at asking the question, or to ask the question verbally. If that doesn't work, then I'll just read them out. So I'm going to try with Shannon McElvany from Esri. Hey Shannon, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you,
Yes.
Shannon.
Okay, great. Yeah, I was wondering how sentiment is determined when you're doing your analysis sports, if you have lat long included.
Unfortunately, I only heard the first part of the question, is how we determine sentiment, but I didn't hear the second part, or the extended version.
The second part was on your exports, on whether or not you had latitude and longitude or some kind of location information associated with the export.
Let me see, do we... we actually have in an export function internally, we do have the location information, and we could, I'm not sure for the sources it might make, but we have not activated the full export of the raw data of the original texts for obvious copyright and other problems, and the usage guidelines of the social media platforms. They don't allow you to provide large dumps of their data, so this is why this is not activated. And for those, it would make most sense to export the longitude and latitude as well, because it's pretty much what you see in the geographic map. Yes, we are discussing internally how we can make available limited data exports that would contain longitude and latitude that are in line with all the usage policies of the sources that we are using. To the second question, the sentiment. Sentiment is a hybrid method, but the basis is a sentiment lexicon. So in the different languages, we have specific lexica that contain known positive and negative words, which are often created by linguists that we extend ourselves through automated methods and some machine learning. They are highly language specific. For example, our best sentiment lexicon in English comprises about 10,000 words. In German, to reach the same precision, we need 45,000 words. And then each sentence of the documents that come in is being processed. It looks for the target term, it looks for the positive and negative terms that co-occur, and it also does grammatical processing. So if there is a negation, for example, it has to turn around the polarity. There are certain words that indicate that serve as an amplifier or a weakener. Those have to be considered as well. So the output of this process is each sentence in each document gets a numeric value between -1 and 1. And then if you do a query, like I'm doing a query on methane here. Now I've done a query on methane, and I have 727 results. And then the color coding shows the average sentiment of these 727 sentences.
Thank you, Arno. There is a question from Robert Gurney, who was our last webinar speaker. If Professor Gurney, your question relates to weighting peer-reviewed papers. Did you want to elaborate on the question?
Well, yes, I noticed Neeyati was starting to respond to it. Thank you. I mean, you've got sources of all sorts on here, but there are some sources which well-known peer-reviewed journals and so on, which you are mining, which you could trust probably rather more than something that's a sort of popular newspaper or tweeting or something of that sort. And I was wondering whether you would actually thinking of introducing higher weightings for things which are properly peer-reviewed in places that are journals that are taken seriously for it. The reason I ask is because in climate science, and I'm in a climate department, we have a lot of we put a lot of store in the science areas on peer review and reviewing of results and opinions and so on, and that's extremely important because there's a lot of climate stuff that gets published which is not very good quality. So you could get a very misleading representation if you only listen to one or two of the potential Republican nominees in the past, for instance, of the US election, or other similar people that don't really publish in the refereed literature.
Yes, a very good point. So what's notably missing is, of course, the scientific sector. We don't have scientific publications in there, but that's very high on our list of the things that we want to add. It's just a bit more complicated because you have to have an agreement with the publishers, because ignoring open access, if the large publishing houses, if you read their usage guidelines of their, so you could crawl their websites and get all the abstracts, but it's not even allowed to use abstracts, to automatically index abstracts. So before we do that, we just have to make sure that we have an agreement to actually be able to use it, which I'm very confident that we have. And then I agree, we should definitely make it available as a separate source. And in terms of weighing, did you mean to weigh like a scientific article more than a news media article, or to weigh the actual journals in terms of their quality?
Maybe a bit of both, because you know quite a lot about citations and so on different journals. I think actually from last week's seminar that I gave, where people will have heard about the a lot of people going to open data and publishers wanting to do this. I think publishers are wanting to change themselves quite fast, and we're out of this. So this may be something that we could, using groups like Eye on Earth, we could work quite closely and well with the publishers, because they want their model, the whole business model's changing, and they want to be much more open than they have been. Out of it, and the subscriptions aren't going to be a big source of income for them. It's going to be people paying to publish effectively. So I think that it could be something that maybe, Derek, across Eye on Earth, we could help, and the Belmont Forum, which I talked about, and some other bodies like that, we could actually affect this change.
I think that's where...
And we would have all the... Sorry. So we would be highly interested in that, and we are actually already working towards that goal, and we would have all the representation because we have this reach metric here.
Yeah.
That could be the citation index, for example. So if you take for reach the citation index, or any other quality measure that you could think of. So like the first thing that comes to my mind is, instead of reach in terms of the website traffic statistics, we use the citation index. Then you could also weight by that, or if there are other rankings like ABC classifications, they could be put in there as well, and then you could either segment your queries, just use 8 journals right now, or you could have a combined query but overrank those that appear in the top journals.
Okay, well, I suggest we have a separate conversation about it. I'm meeting some publishers on the 20th, in exactly 2 weeks' time, and I will bring it up with them, and then we'll get through Derek. We can maybe have a further separate meeting, but not a seminar about what we might do together.
Perfect. Looking forward to that.
There's an observation there by Mark Rayner. It seems the journals would have a great business model using UNEP Live by allowing search results to link to the documents, but if you want them, there may still be a price. Yeah, so That's a good observation.
And I completely agree it would be a win-win situation because we help them getting their articles discovered. And I understand that some might not, be able to provide us the full text of the articles if they're not open access. But even allowing us to index their abstracts where they don't give away a lot, I think would help both sides.
Just a very quick last question to Arno, maybe if I can sneak it in. Arno, when you say we are doing this, we're doing that, who's the we as we begin to talk to publishers? Liability comes up. Did you get this right? Is your statement inflammatory? Did you misunderstand what I was trying to say and ruin my business? So the we for UNEP Live, is that UNEP itself? Is it a subpart of UNEP? Is it the United Nations system? Is it your university? I just wondered, as we get to the interface with publishing and money, to be clear on who the we is. Thank you.
I hope you can hear me better now. I quickly logged out and on again. Is the sound quality okay now?
Yes, it's better than it was.
Okay, good. So the question was, when I said we, who that is. I mean, we in terms of the developers of the web intelligence platform are researchers at MODUL University Vienna, and we were building that platform for UNEP. And UNEP Live, being part of UNEP.org, was an existing platform to track environmental indicators across, I think, 193 member countries. And we built the system for them to capture also the infosphere, also the stakeholder communication around these indicators that they are providing to the public. And both systems, the UNEP Live and the extension of Web Intelligence, are both open data, so they're open to the public. Did I answer your question? I don't think I heard the whole question.
Thank you, Arno. That's good. Thank you.
Arno, a question from myself. You've mentioned that you support the UN languages in the interface, but a subset in terms of content mining, if that's the right term. Is there any time frame for Arabic to be included in the content extraction?
We don't have a specific time frame. I mean, we have definitely the goal to capture all UN languages, including Arabic. But as many things, it's always a resource problem because that's quite labor intensive. So it's easier to translate the results because then you can work with automated translation. To add a real content language, you have to do the whole natural language processing pipeline. So you have to tokenize sentences. You need a sentiment lexicon in the language. You need to have certain grammar patterns in that language. So it's a much more complicated process as compared to adapting the interface language. So it is a plan of us, but at the moment we haven't secured the funding to build that.
Hi Derek, this is Mustafa from Institute for Global Environmental Strategies in Japan. I have a small question about the audience of the Web Intelligence platform. Was it developed targeting any specific audience, for example, policymakers or researchers, or it is for, in general, for everybody? Thank you.
It's principally, of course, accessible to everyone, so of course also to the public. Specific stakeholders we had in mind are, of course, those that have an interest in analyzing information flows. So whereas citizens might just want to learn about the topic, I think all the other stakeholders, they have an interest to understand how the public dialogue is being shaped. If users, if certain groups, if there is risk awareness of a certain issue, that would be policymakers, of course. That would be scientists to track if actually their insights are being taken up by the media or others, or if their scientific results are somewhat misrepresented. It's of course news media, so it's mostly those that have an interest in understanding how the public dialogue evolves and also what the driving forces are behind those changes that we observe.
Okay, thank you. A second question, sorry, is it accessible only from the computers, or we can also access it with mobile phones or tablet PCs?
It is accessible from all devices. The current dashboard is optimized for desktop because you'll find it a bit hard because it's quite detailed, and the resolution needs to be quite high to use all the functions on the phone. But that's one of our goals. We plan to add in the next couple of months a specific mobile version where you then don't have this multiple coordinated views with all the visualizations at the same time that are synchronized, but rather being able to slide through the various visualizations and only have one visualization at a time, which would be more suitable for using that platform on a mobile phone.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much.
Question I have. You mentioned how you would be able to link or you put a filter, or however you want to express it, to the SDGs. Can you just tell us a little bit more about mechanisms and plans for aligning or comparing public sentiment to official indicators to see whether public perception is aligned with what the data is telling us?
Yeah, so the first step we want to do is we will define the topic, so that means representing each Sustainable Development Goal by a bundle of keywords that cover the main essence of that goal, which will be accessible like the other topics in the upper left corner of the dashboard right now. And then also in the next step to what we call a relation tracker, then to be able to visualize the relations of specific topics, for example indicators, and the Sustainable Development Goals. So you'll have a two-column visualization where on the left side you'll have the topics that you select and define, which would be, if you do the analysis of Sustainable Development Goals, would be the list of all or a subset of the Sustainable Development Goals. And on the right side you would see which persons, which organizations, which locations are mostly connected with those Sustainable Development Goals, plus all the other associations you see already right now. So you would also be able to understand what are Twitter users in the last month associating with SDG 5, for example.
Yeah, that would be fascinating insight. Any other questions?
Derek, this is Bill Sontag. Just a comment, I suppose, as well as a question. The doing of this thing is quite impressive, and it's clearly its visualizations and analytical capacity is of very real interest. Its utility, however, is going to come in the fact that people use it, and I'm wondering, what kind of promotional work is planned? Again, back to the audience question that was posed a few moments ago. This could be very valuable for various sectors, be it public policymakers or media or citizen groups or government agencies looking to start to make decisions about topics and prioritize their work. But again, unless it's promoted so that people are aware of its capacity, I think it's gonna be useful, interesting, but perhaps not as well utilized as it could be. Any comment? Thanks.
In terms of dissemination and proportion, yes, I see Neeyati was just answering that. So I guess Neeyati would be, of course, be the person to ask this question. One thing we have done, about 2 weeks ago, I've presented the platform at UNEP 2 in Nairobi, and I think it was very well received, and I think a lot of stakeholders actually got a glimpse of what it can do and what functionality it has. UNEP, of course, has many plans together with SDGs to promote it. I've also put in my email address, so if you email Neeyati or myself with some ideas or other venues where you think we could provide or do a demo, or I'm always happy to present the platform, then yes, please feel free to email me, and either a webinar, or if it's also possible, also we can arrange a physical meeting somewhere.
Thank you very much. Crazy idea. So here's a technology, and we're talking about who's going to use it and so on. One suggestion might be to look at the 3 focal points of Iron Earth and become kind of a test case by using UNEP Live to shape some ideas around the networking of data, the accessibility to data, and the capacity building, and be able to kind of put together a far more informed profile of what are these 3 areas, what are we talking about, what countries are most interested in them. So I guess what I'm suggesting is, instead of waiting for the world to come to UNEP Live and begin to use it, you have on the phone call and on the Iron Earth network people who are passionate about using data and information about information. So again, I just posed, we just had a meeting of the first of the 3 focal areas last week. We hope and expect to have 2 more meetings on capacity building and on access. And I guess I'm just suggesting that instead of just going away and saying, well, this is an interesting, UNEP Live is interesting, and maybe even sneaking in a peek or 2, we in Iron Earth may want to use it to our benefit and therefore provide some help to Neeyati, UNEP, and the University in Vienna to promote its use by beginning to show how useful it is to shape, let's say, research directions or projects and so on. Just a thought.
Okay. Well, yes, I see your comment, Neeyati, welcoming the opportunity to engage with the Iron Earth community and showcasing some of the other capabilities that are there. And I think we'll take you up on that offer. That would be, I think this 2-way flow between the alliance organizations and the community is what Iron Earth is based upon. So this is going in the right direction, I think. A question from Sandra in the chat box: can anyone use UNEP Live and the Web Intelligence Platform?
Yes, it's just uneplive.unep.org, and that gets you to this. Sorry, you don't see my screen anymore. So uneplive.unep.org. I can actually also. To the main UNEP Live platform, with also what Neeyati just mentioned in the sidebar, with all the time series data, the open data on environmental indicators, all the country-specific profiles, and including the Web Intelligence tab, which leads you to the system that I've just shown.